with illegal migrants using what could be the final months of Biden's presidency to rush across the border before a second Trump term. Two Colombian illegal migrants who crossed the border in Arizona last week told the New York Post that they fear the election will make border crossings harder, saying, "We don't want Trump." That speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it says everything about where we are and where the election is going, frankly. I mean, look, I've been to the border, unlike Kamala Harris, and I've spoken to the migrants coming across, and they don't hide the fact. They don't hide the ball. They say, look, we're here because we know we can get in under the Biden administration. We didn't come under the Trump administration because we couldn't get in. It's as simple as that, Rita. But this administration is so bad at this. Never mind the demographic consequences, the economic consequences to the U.S. of having 7 million people cross the border illegally, just from an electoral standpoint, just from the fact that this is the #2 issue in our country. You're really going to fail at that, knowing that it is going to cost you the election. Biden is so bad. And I've said it before, hats off to the Texas governor, the Florida governor, who at the time was just political theater when they took the migrants and they shipped them to blue states and blue cities across the country, turned out to be an absolute massive win politically because it had actually turned the tide of people who live in these big cities who are now saying, we cannot deal with this problem. It is absolute brilliance. And this topic, along with inflation, is going to sink the Biden administration.
Yes, all those sanctuary cities where they don't want to provide sanctuary to illegal immigrants anymore. They love to have that title, but they don't want to actually put it into practice. Now, to Donald Trump's trial in Manhattan, he's not going to be testifying in this criminal trial. And it comes as Alan Dershowitz writes in the New York Post. Just when I thought this case couldn't be any more bizarre, I read this piece. He said, "There's never been such a spectacle as this hush money criminal trial against Trump. At one point in the trial, Judge Merchant cleared out the courtroom after a witness for the defence, Robert Costello, raised his eyebrows at one of his rulings. Dershowitz wrote, "For some reason, I was allowed to stay, and I observed one of the most remarkable wrong-headed biases I have ever seen. The judge actually threatened to strike all of Costello's testimony if he raised his eyebrows again." Ami, just when you think this case couldn't be any more crazy or corrupt, you read something like that.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. I think the issue, at least for me, I think the biggest issue is the contrasting coverage of what's going on. Now, the problem is it's not being televised, okay? So it's not being televised. Really, you're just at the whim of the biased interpreters of what they are watching. So if you're watching and I've watched both. If you watch CNN, for example, you think that the prosecution is destroying the defense and that Trump is 100% going to be prosecuted. If you watch Fox News, it's the exact opposite. They're saying there's no question Trump is going to be acquitted. They look at a guy like the Judge Merchant. If you watch CNN, he's the greatest judge we've ever seen. If you watch Fox News, he's totally biased. We don't know because we can't watch this ourselves. Now, I will tell you this. I know I'm not a lawyer, but I'm playing one on Sky News. One thing you don't want to do is you don't want to demonize the judge when you're not really playing to the court of public opinion, you're playing to the jurors themselves. The one thing I have been a juror, and the one thing I can tell you is that the jurors have a special connection to the judge. They're not thinking about politics. What they know is he was there when they were first chosen. He was there when he walked them through the process. He's there when they have lunch. They have a deep connection with it. They don't like when the prosecution continuously attacks the judge. So I think that is a tactical mistake. But the worst part is we just don't. Most people don't know.
This jury and judge do share a deep connection. It's a hatred of Donald Trump. I mean, please, let's not pretend that this is some sort of unbiased trial in an unbiased territory. This is deep Democrat territory where the jury pool comes from a very Democrat voting base, and we've seen just the elements of this trial that are unlike anything else legal experts who observe these things for years have seen. So I take your point about the different coverage, but I would argue that most conservatives expect to see a conviction in this case, but they don't see it that way because they think Donald Trump's getting a fair trial. They see it because it seems to be almost predetermined, but then it will be appealed and probably overturned at some later date. But I want to get your response to this next issue, Ami. Tell me about the reaction we've seen to the Biden White House offering its condolences to the butcher of Tehran, Ibrahim Raisi, who died in a helicopter crash earlier this week. Just the moral decay that would see an administration offer condolences to this monster who tortured pregnant women and slaughtered thousands of innocent people. Has there been much backlash, or are we used to this sort of degeneracy now?
Yeah, I think it bears repeating. He's called the butcher of Tehran for a reason, not just what you just mentioned before that he's done and the tens of thousands of people he killed and tortured. But I want to point out that one particular thing he did that was of particular deviousness is that before he murdered some very young women who were virgins, and since there is a prohibition against killing a virgin, the girls would be raped before they were hung so they could legally be killed. This is the kind of deviant monster we're talking about. And first, let me talk about the UN real quick, another cesspool of deviancy, where they lowered the flag to half-mast, and they had a moment of silence for this animal. They didn't have a moment of silence for the 1,200 Israelis who were raped and murdered on October 7th, but they did for the Iranian president. Now, you expect that from the UN. I covered the UN for 5 years. I know how disgusting that place is, the moral equivalency, the lack of morals when it comes to that place. But like you said, to have the State Department and by extension, the Biden administration put out their condolences, I don't know what they're playing at. I don't know what the point is. I don't even know why they would do that. The only thing I can think about is this bizarre notion that we have to befriend our enemies so they can understand that we're not the bad guys. We're not the guys you should be going after. Go after the other people. That's the only way I can rationalize this. Of course, look, you could look at the Biden. Now, I will say this, at least the Biden administration showed outrage for the ICC ruling against Israel. But the ICC ruling happened not in small part because the Biden administration publicly said that Israel was going after and targeting civilians and banned weapons. If you don't think that played a role in that, you're crazy. So I think all of this is kind of coming together and coalescing, and it to the point where we're actually having a moment of silence for a depraved human being like the former president, thankfully, of Iran.
Yes, I think a lot of people watched that at the UN and their first thought was, let's defund the UN, let's get out of there. Ami Horowitz, thank you so much for your time this evening.